Hey guys, my name is Marcus and I specialize in the somatic work, primarily focusing on the deep wounds and processing the stuck things in our own bodies. I'm making this video as additional information for the Dr. K's video about the deep hurt. It's in a way a reaction, so hope it's going to be beneficial and it's going to provide you value. So let's start now.
Today, we're going to talk about the deep hurt. Now, this is something that I sort of referenced in a video from a couple of months ago, and this concept of like this hurt that I feel that's like deep, deep, deep inside of me. Some of us have like the deep hurt inside that the people without the deep hurt like don't understand. And no matter how good my life becomes, and my life is fantastic, like don't get me wrong, I'm loved by many people. I love many people. I'm financially somewhat stable at the moment. My health is there for the most part. I've got kids. I don't have to worry about paying my bills every month. So it's great. Like I play video games and everything in my life is good. But despite the fact that my life is amazing in so many ways, there is something like deep in here that hurts. And hurts a lot and never seems to get better.
So the deep wounds or something that is very deep within us lives across time. And it got nothing to do with the outside success or relationship or how much money we got, because it's just there.
And that's what we're going to talk about today.
And it can come from the past, so it can be from our own life or a generational trauma or even something
So when
else.
I talked about the deep hurt, it resonated very deeply with some part of the audience. And the really interesting thing is that many of these people who feel the deep hurt had also fixed a lot of things in their life. And when I sit with patients, it's so fascinating because a key part of the deep hurt is that it doesn't get better with healing. Sometimes it actually gets more intense.
And why it got intense? So what is happening in the moment when someone tames the mind more? Let's say they care of the anxiety or the depression, or they tame the mind more. They better understand their own emotions. They know how to handle cortisol and stress in their own life. And if they're not dissociated, what happens is that the wound or the things that were in the body is like, yeah, okay, you feel better now. I'm going to provide you more things for you to process and release. And it can be, we can start to be aware that like, whew, there is so much pain within. So that's what is happening there, that we are kind of uncovering more and more layers. That in a moment when we are constantly thinking, then we are not able to feel because we are stuck in a head.
So when someone has, let's say, has been traumatized and has a diagnosis of PTSD, PTSD affects us on so many different levels. It literally alters our physiology. So our tendency to release adrenaline, to release cortisol, that goes up. We have a very low threshold for our physiologic system to go into panic mode. It also works on an emotional level, right? So if I have a patient who has depression, we know that there are certain parts of their brain that will be like hyperactive in terms of experiencing negative emotion. So if we look at mental illness, it exists at the physiologic level, at the emotional level, at the cognitive level. We'll have certain repetitive patterns of thinking, right? We have certain cognitive biases or certain beliefs, which are really, really like concrete and hard to get rid of. I'm a loser. It's hopeless. There's no point. These beliefs are really kind of set in stone. The interesting thing is that when we do psychiatry with people, this stuff gets better, right? So we have a guide to trauma and guide to depression where we talk about all that kind of stuff. But what really excited me about making Dr. K's Guide to Depression is this other stuff. It's the stuff that isn't a part of psychiatry, the stuff that is a little bit more existential, a little bit more philosophical, a little bit more spiritual. And when I work with my patients and we do the work of healing, there's a wound that remains no matter what. So I had a patient who had borderline personality disorder, which is characterized by an unstable sense of self. People feel this like emptiness inside. So most human beings walk around the planet and they have a sense of who they are, but people with BPD feel this like core emptiness. And the cool thing is we have evidence-based treatment for BPD. So we did that for a while. Patient got way better, was starting to live their life, started to feel happy on the cognitive level, on the emotional level, on the physiologic level. They started to improve, did yoga and Tai Chi and all this stuff. And one day they came into my office and they said, I had a really fascinating conversation. We were seeing each other like basically once a month now because they were relatively stable. They said, I went and I talked to my grandfather and I was telling him about like my treatment. And I was telling him, I'm still working on it. And like this emptiness inside me wasn't quite an emptiness. It had changed from emptiness to like a deep sense of suffering. I turned to my grandfather and I was telling him like that feeling is still there. And he's like, oh, like I've had that my whole life. It's always been there, right? That doesn't get better. That's just the way life is. Some of us, there are some people like us who just have this deep ache deep inside of us that will never get better.
Now, I found out in my own practice that a lot of people have it, but they're not aware of it because of, for example, they're consuming a lot or they're daydreaming a lot, they are thinking a lot. So there is no possibility for them to get access to it, or they experience a lot of wounds. So then it means there is dissociation present in their body. And the thing is, what he was talking about there is that it never gets better. What is happening there from the therapeutic approach is primarily taught in the West. The therapist can get only to the depth with the client they went themselves. Therefore, if the therapist got the wounds themselves, and the client comes with the wounds in their own bodies, and the therapist didn't went deep inside within, they didn't process and release a lot of the things, they are unable to go to the depth with the client to a certain level because they are stuck too. So that has been my experience, what I observed.
That's the deep hurt. So this is going to be a little bit weird because this is not something that we understand scientifically. So this is something where I'm going to explain a lot of different possibilities, but ultimately, like, this work is going to have to be done by you, right? So y'all are going to have to listen to this and share your experience of it, and maybe y'all can help us figure out what the deep hurt is.
So how it works is that when there is a deep wound or a deep hurt in our own bodies, and this is us, the deep hurt represents in a way a crying child, and I'm in a way mother. So rather than pushing away to the room or stop crying and shouting or having resistance towards it, we learn continually how to provide care, understanding, love, freedom, safe space, compassion for the wound, and through the breath we are getting close to it and we approach it. And we re-experience and breathe through it. And we can start to cry, we can start to sweat. It's uncomfortable, it's painful work, but I found out that this is the only way that leads to freedom, where, how Jung say, the one who looks outside dreams, the one who looks inside awakens. And this is the way. That's what I found out. Now, then what happens is that primarily the more we're gonna feel through the wound, it starts to open and we start to process it in a way. But for that, we need to learn how to tame the mind, only because if we are continually getting grabbed by the thoughts, then we are thinking all the time, we are unable to be in the present and we are unable to be still. And this is, for example, just another layer that needs to be processed. Or if we are very tired, if we are not well rested, again, if we want to approach it, we don't have much energy, therefore we would fall into dullness. So there is whole magic about it, how to work. This is why I have community and everything, how to work with that. And then we learn how to continually be in our own bodies more and process it. And I found out another thing is that a lot of the wounds and the trauma, or just like this deep hurt that I would have in my body, wouldn't even be from my own life. That it's something generational that I'm just processing. That's also interesting. So in short, that's how it works.
This deep within you. So if we sort of look at, I think 70 to 80% of people on the planet operate mentally between like the ground level and the fifth floor. So they have thoughts, they have emotions, there's stuff that's kind of maybe somewhat buried beneath the surface, a little bit suppressed, but like they basically go through their lives like on a surface kind of way. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way. It's just that, they when they are in a happy situation, they feel happy. When things get frustrated at work, they feel sad. When they get broken up with, they go through a period of depression, but then they kind of bounce out of that. Sometimes these people also have diagnoses like depression and trauma, which if you sort of get these psychiatric interventions, people will heal. But there are some people that I sit with, and I would say maybe 20 to 30% of people where there's something just deeper down. It's just like way deep down. And no matter what you do on the surface, that thing stays there. So that's the first feature of it. Second feature of it is it has a lot of oomph. Like, I don't know how else to describe it. I was thinking about using the word energy, but that word is so loaded. So what I mean by it is that the size of the thing, the density of the thing is really, really, really strong. It's like there are times in my life where I will be doing absolutely nothing and I will feel this like ache deep within me.
So what happens there is that when he's not doing anything and he just feels it more and more.
I think this ache sort of feels good in some way.
So what happens there is that in a moment when we stop doing anything, and let's say we don't have release of the chemicals in the body regards, let's say after exercising, I don't recommend doing this type of work, because if the chemicals are not being tamed, we are unable to be able to feel through what is present in our own bodies. The chemicals is a layer that needs to be processed. So primarily even with the cheap dopamine, if I wouldn't be doing anything, I'm able to get access to my body more. And if I would be playing video game or watching a movie or listening to music and I would get lost in it, there I'm losing access to what is present in my own body.
It adds a depth to life. I love really, really sad music. I like feeling sad. And I think sometimes the people with the deep hurt like love sadness in a weird way. I also think that when sometimes people will walk up to me and they'll say, "Oh, Dr. K, like, I know this sounds weird, but I love you." And then I will say, I love you too. And I really feel that in that moment. Like I don't know if this makes sense to y'all, but this is also another feature of the deep hurt where it brings us a profound sense of like compassion for other human beings. I've also seen this with some of the artists that I work with, right? So when I have a patient who has like bipolar disorder and writes music or paints or something like that, oftentimes when we sort of go through the process of healing, what they really hate about things like mood stabilizers is not that it like keeps the depression at bay. They love that it keeps the depression at bay. They love that it keeps the mania at bay. What they hate is that when we start taking things like mood stabilizers, it cuts us off from this part of us.
Because what happens is that, it creates a layer. I don't know how it works regards to science, but I know what happens with the body. So in the moment we are unable to access it, it just blocks it out. Just like something happens in the body. So, yeah.
Which is kind of weird because this part of us doesn't necessarily feel good. It's like a negative valence of experience, but somehow it adds like depth and flavor to life. So that's another feature of the deep hurt. And the third feature that we've kind of talked about is that it doesn't seem to get better. If anything, the better you get, it gets worse or more profound. Okay.
So that's how I described it earlier. In the moment when we're going to tame the mind, we're going to, let's say, not going to suffer from stress that much. We're going to have a better job. We make more money. Let's say that things get better. The things get more, we start to be more aware of it because we are uncovering more and more layers. And I would get to the point that I would tame my mind more and more, but then I would be able to be aware of the wounds inside more and more. And I didn't know what to do, and I didn't find any information anywhere about how to work with that. There was like none. And then I started doing this type of content. I'm making these videos for people out there to help all of you to process it.
Okay. So what I've seen with people is when I work with them clinically, like the deep hurt can sort of synergize with mental illness. So it's like this thing that's deep within you, but if your physiology is messed up, if your emotions are messed up, if you're in a toxic environment, if your cognitions are like messed up, then that oomph from the deep hurt will like synergize with all this toxic crap on the top and will make your life profoundly worse. But even when I sit with people who are depressed, I think like when we really sit down and tunnel into it, they can even tell the difference between, okay, this is the depression which comes and goes and is a little bit, you know, cognitively messed up. Like I can see that, oh, now I can see that like my thinking isn't really real, but there's an element down there that actually never changes. Hey y'all, if you're
Yeah, and that's what is happening. In a moment, for example, with the jealousy, with anger, I wouldn't have anger all the time. It would come and go with the jealousy in the past too. But this kind of thing would be always there. And I would come to the even when I would feel good and I wouldn't be able to enjoy it at all, only because the tension was there with me. And I wouldn't be fully offending myself because the thing would be kind of blocking me to actually living the life. And then I was learning how to figure it out on how to process it so I can feel more
interested
free.
in applying as human beings. In the bio, psychoanalytic research, because this stuff is not in your textbooks about cognitive behavioral therapy or treatment manuals for borderline personality disorder. So there's this guy named Donald Stern who basically talks about how there's stuff in the unconscious that is uncrystallized. So he sort of says that he sort of disagrees with a lot of people like Freud. So Freud basically believed that if we take like a trauma, okay? So once you've been traumatized, there's a particular kind of wound that is within your unconscious, within your conscious mind. But that wound is basically like formulated. So Stern said something actually a little bit different. He says, yeah, that stuff can happen. You can have a particular kind of psychological wound, but as he puts it, the unconscious is composed of potential experience. Contents that do not yet have an explicit, knowable shape that may take any one of several or many possible shapes when eventually they are formulated, okay? So perception is constructed from a less fully formulated state. There is an ongoing process of emergence in perception, thought, and feeling from vagueness to clarity. So what Stern is saying is like, yeah, there is formulated stuff. There's stuff that has shape and has a particular insecurity, but there's also like this primitive psychosubstance, and that what could be the deep hurt is like, it's not a formulated thing yet. So it's kind of this like, you know, it's like a ball of clay. It hasn't taken shape, and that through the process of living and growing and changing, that this could formulate into a particular form. So that's just like, that's the best psychological explanation that I've been able to find. Although I don't think that that really tracks with my understanding of the deep hurt but maybe it does, right? Because it does get kind of more profound over time. The better you get with your life, like the more your life improves, the more that you feel the deep hurt. So who knows? That's just one of the options. So let's take a look at a couple of other options. One is that the deep hurt is essentially like a primitive trauma, which is sort of related to this. So maybe when I was growing up, something bad happened to me when I was a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old, or a 4-year-old. And one of the key things to remember about psychological injuries is they maintain the resolution of our mind. So if I have a 3-year-old child and they get traumatized in a particular way, their mind doesn't know how to lay down that memory with like complicated verbal stuff, right? So a 3-year-old has a very primitive and deep injury. If I'm a teenager or an adult and I get traumatized in a particular way, that wound will be less primitive. It'll be more defined, right? So I'm pathetic, I'm ugly, like for example. So a teenager may think if they get bullied that I am ugly. So that kind of injury has more form to it than like a 2-year-old. A 2-year-old doesn't understand the concept of being ugly. So there's a possibility that the deep hurt is essentially a trauma, although I don't really think so, because there are many cases of like, healing of trauma, which I've worked with patients, but the deep hurt remains. Another possibility is that this could be like an epigenetic phenomenon. So what does that mean? So this means that we know that there's some aspects of psychological damage which can actually be passed down through the generations. Now, it's not passed down at the genetic level. It doesn't alter our genetic code, but it alters our epigenetics. So epigenetics is turning on or off our genetic code. And we know, for example, that Holocaust, the descendants of Holocaust survivors can exhibit some symptoms of PTSD. So there's one example of the deep hurt, which I talked about on Stephen Bartlett's podcast. So here's a quick clip of it.
And when I was meditating, I realized one day that in a past life, I know this is going to sound completely insane, but I've done that. What you're hearing now is not a hypothetical. I've lost a child before. I've been a mother before, and it took me some time to figure this out. But when you meditate, you start to discover things about yourself. And I have this very deep sense of loss in me that I've lost a child. This is not hypothetical. I know what it's like to lose a child. And it's happened to me before. And I still carry that hurt with me from a past life. So when you ask me this hypothetical, this is not a hypothetical for me. This is a trauma that I've experienced, just not in this life.
So again, I'm going to share with you my insight regards this, because this came to me when the huge wound near my heart is that I experienced in one of my past lives that they circled me, a man with weapons, and they took a sword and they stabbed me deep into my heart. And in the practice, when I started to re-experience, I started getting visuals from the past. Then when I was experiencing another kind of wound inside, a deep hurt, then I would have visuals from my own childhood. How was I crying and there was no one for me? That was interesting. And then we have to always, like, when you would look, if you have grandparents, ask them what they went through, how much they remember. It's so good to know about your own lineage, what was actually happening. Because what is actually happening is that, like, look here in my own country, we had communism. Then we have wars. A lot of people were dissociated. They experienced so much pain in their own life. They didn't know what to do about it, so they pushed it down. They were drinking a lot. And what would happen in my lineage of men, that my father, my grandfather, and how it went, is that when my grandfather was in a war and he experienced PTSD, he wasn't able to feel, to provide care, love for a son. Then his son was born and he just wasn't emotionally available. So there was something missing. And it went like this through the lineage, that all the men weren't able to feel. And then I started doing the work and I started to be aware of all what they experienced in a way what they didn't have. This kind of hole within, that there was just pain and no love or care.
My subjective experience of it. Like, there's this really, really profound pain deep within me that has nothing to do with my experience of this life. So then the question becomes, okay, like, what is this, right? So maybe it's something that I made up in my mind. Maybe my genes are just wired a particular way. But I think this is where epigenetics come in. So it's possible.
So it can be a combination of things. So either we can carry it in our own from the past, we can have it from our own past life that we carry into the body, or even we can carry it from the generational trauma. I know this is something more esoteric, mambo jumbo, but it's like when you start to do the work on yourself rather than intellectually trying to understand with the mind, but learning how to feel, you can know so much. Again, as Jung said, the one who looks outside dreams, the one who looks inside awakens.
And I know, for example, that people, in the generations above me have lost children. So if my grandmother, let's say, lost a child and then that changed her epigenetics, is it possible that her psychological experience of losing a child could have been passed down to me? That's one of the options. The other option, and this is sort of why I like, some people will say, oh, Dr. K is biased towards Hindu spirituality, which is absolutely true, right? So we look at the evidence of it. Like, I was raised in a particular culture. I wasn't really Hindu when I was growing up. I thought it was all BS. I was pretty much an atheist. But I've absolutely had profound experiences in meditation. And part of the reason that I've been drawn towards meditation is because I have some of these experiences and I want to understand this stuff, right? I want to understand what is this ache inside me. And as I read texts about epigenetics and psychoanalysis, I don't find an answer that's satisfying enough. And so as I turn to things like meditation, meditation and I start to do meditations on, unlocking my past lives because I was really curious about this stuff. And I was like, oh, this crap doesn't exist. But in this text, there's a technique that sort of talks a little bit about how to have an understanding of your past lives. So I was like, let me try this out. And as I do these kinds of techniques, I feel like this unlocking of this sensation. So the deep hurt has always been there, but as I do these meditative techniques, it starts to take some degree of form, okay? And so maybe that's the psychoanalytic perspective. Like, I'm not quite sure, but that's just my experience of it. And that's why I need y'all's help, because I don't really know what this stuff is. I'm just putting this stuff out there. So it's possible that, if we're looking at the differential diagnosis for what the deep hurt is, I think something that is on my list doesn't have to be on your list, but I'm just offering it as a possibility, is this idea of like karma and reincarnation. And do we carry this psychological thing is there. The question is, where did it come from? So it could be from an unformulated thought. It could be from epigenetics.
Now, I found out is that there is a trap that person can fall into. They can start to overanalyze and trying to understand what is happening and finding the source of it. I found out it's not even like doesn't matter. It's just the pain, and let's just like learn how to work with that. So I found a point that I stopped thinking about it and analyzing it because that was distracting me in a way. And I was learning how with the empty mind, I was just being present with the wound, with the pain inside. Therefore, I was just providing the care without needing to continue to describe it. But I get what he's talking about.
And one of the things that's on my list of potential options is that this is a psychological wound that I inherited from a past life, because it sure as hell doesn't seem to have come from this one. The last thing that we're going to talk about in terms of the deep hurt is something called the bodhicitta. So bodhicitta means sort of mind of a Buddha. But in the 8th century, there was a beautiful text that was written that we're going to show you all in a second, that talks a little bit about the wound of compassion. So in the Buddhist tradition, as people started to meditate and get super serious about these like very advanced meditation techniques, they describe something that's really interesting. So when we look at like the early stages of Buddhist meditative practice, it's about like tranquility, right? So I feel angry, I feel upset, I'm sad about this, I'm attached to this, I have an ego around this. It's all this stuff that we're familiar with, right? There's ego is bad, comparison is bad, comparison is the thief of joy, sadness is bad, all that. We're going for inner peace. As we make progress on this path and we start to achieve inner peace, something really weird happens. This thing called the wound of compassion starts to open up within us. So it's kind of like anxiety, depression, sadness, anger, jealousy, all this stuff is over here. Then we attain inner peace. And on the other side of inner peace is this ache of compassion. And it's described as a very profound sense of suffering. So here are a couple of passages that describe this ache. Likewise, different beings in their joys and sorrows are like me, all one in wanting happiness. So everybody wants happiness. The pain of mine does not afflict or cause discomfort to another's body. My pain is my own. And yet this pain is hard for me to bear because I cling and take it for my own. And other beings' pain I do not feel, and yet because I take them for myself, their suffering is mine and therefore hard to bear. And therefore I'll dispel the pain of others, for it is simply pain just like my own. And others I will aid and benefit, for they are living beings like my body. Since I and other beings both in wanting happiness are equal and alike, everyone wants happiness, what difference is there to distinguish us, that I should strive to have my bliss alone? Since I and other beings both in fleeing suffering are equal and alike, everyone's trying to run away from suffering, what difference is there to distinguish us, that I should save myself and not the others? Since the pain of others does no harm to me, I do not shield myself from it. So why guard against my future pain, which does no harm to this, my present me? Basically, this text talks a lot about, I have this suffering and this pain within me. A lot of other people have this suffering and pain within me. And it talks a lot about sacrificing ourselves for the sake of like other people's betterment, and like sacrifice in a really messed up way. My body thus, and all my goods besides, and all my merits gained and to be gained, I give them all and do not count the cost, to bring about the benefit of beings. This body I have now resigned to serve the pleasure of all living beings. Let them ever kill, despise, and beat it, use it according to their wish. And so let beings do to me whatever does not bring them injury. Whenever they may think of me, let this not fail to bring them benefit.
I don't know about that, to be honest, because from my experience, how it works is that when you continually care about you and you learn how to be more at peace and you transform the wounds, then the other people are healing more in your presence and they just feel good. And their own wounds are start to being processed because of how much regulated you are. So that's my experience.
So this person is basically saying, let them do whatever they want. Their hurt is important. I should sacrifice myself for the sake of other people's hurt. Now, it's not so much about whether this is right or wrong. What I want y'all to think about is, Does the person who write this feel the deep hurt? For someone to say something like, let me give up everything that I have for the benefit of other people, who cares about the cost to me? It's all about them. Imagine the degree of compassion that they have to feel. And I don't know if this makes sense, but like, as I have grown more stable, the hurt that I feel for other people, like my compassion has started to increase so much. And so
I got also experiences that I feel the wounds of others in a way. And it's very interesting, but I wouldn't have it in past in this level. That when I meet with people, I feel the pain they have. And it's like, yeah, man, it's like you have the pain that I have. And I would just sense it in them that I met a woman and I was talking with her and I would get this that, you know, you got the same thing as me. And I would feel this tension in her, that this deep wound. It's like I would have it too. It was such an interesting thing. But then I found out that the more I would feel at ease, at peace, something is happening in the outside world. Things are different. This is just my experience. And I don't see many people that would completely release the wounds inside their own bodies because there is no guidance much. I've read the books, I watched the videos, and I never seen it. It's like, what is the way? And I found that this is the way. That we learn how to continually feel through the pain. Feel through it, re-experience it. And it could be, in a way, like a whole ocean within that wants to be processed. But
I wonder,
it's a wonderful journey.
Whether these people who are sort of talking about the bodhicitta, about the wound of compassion, are actually right. The one thing that I do know that's so interesting is that it's been my overwhelming experience that the more that I lean into the deep hurt, the more oomph it adds in the outside world. So as I connect to this deep hurt, and that's why like my patients with bipolar hate getting rid of it, it causes me to feel more hurt, feel more pain, but it also enriches life. And I tend to find that oomph also, like when I lean into the oomph, I start to see manifestation in the real world. So I know that sounds really weird. So let me explain. Some of my patients, it means writing a beautiful song. It means making a beautiful work of art. In my case, it's making videos on this channel like this. It's recognizing that there's 8 billion people on the planet, most of whom are suffering and who don't know what the hell to do about it. And so here I am, not even understanding this concept. But as I connect to that hurt, it's like I have to try, even if it costs me something and no one benefits from it because I'm not making any fucking sense, because none of this stuff makes sense and we don't even know what we're talking about. I have to try anyway. And that comes from the deep hurt.
So that has been my experience, years of working with that. And I was re-traumatizing, I was overwhelming constantly my own body, my own self with the wound because I was trying to dig into it, what is there. So the transformation, this is just invitation. I have the community, I have the videos, you can watch it, even on how to heal yourself with the wounds and continue doing this practice. That's what I found out, that it works. But it's a slow work, it's patient work. And everybody's individual, we got different stuff in life, different things happening. There's the medical stuff, so it's a complex thing. But I found out, primarily finding the time in our own day to sit with the pain, with the wound, with the tension, breathe regularly, bring more relaxation with drop shoulders, and learning how to feel through it. And then observing what happens then. And observe how the life starts to change. And how the whole life is damn different. That in a way we find that even here in our own bodies we can experience heaven. And that's a fascinating thing. So thank you very much for watching. I hope this video provided you a certain level of value. Great day.